Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. And how is the Congress doing so far? The Republican-led Congress. We get our Congressman's thoughts on that this morning. He is the Congressman for the 4th Congressional District. He is Congressman Scott Perry, and he joins us here on a Monday morning. I don't know if he's bleary-eyed from watching football or not, but good to have you on, Congressman. How are you?
No, it's great to be on. I'm well, and I'm not bleary-eyed at all. I kind of worked through the game there. I didn't have any favorite in the thing, so I was able to do some reading and writing, and I had my 2 little girls with me, and actually my mom was over, so we made a good night of it.
Do you have a favorite team normally?
I do have a favorite team, but they weren't in the Super Bowl.
Are they called the Eagles?
They're called the Steelers.
The Steelers?
Yeah, I'm a Steelers guy.
Oh,
yeah.
all right, okay. All right, so you stand tall. I'm a Ravens guy myself, but I like the Steelers too. So
sure, yeah.
Except when the Ravens play them, and then it's a war. But
well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you gotta have some foundation somewhere, right? You got to prioritize.
Exactly. You got to stand tall. And anyway, I wanted to talk to you. You guys passed the Keystone XL pipeline bill last week.
Yeah.
And took a little bit of time with the Senate, but they got it through.
Right.
A couple little minor changes, I guess, in there. But it now goes to the president's desk. Now, the president's popularity ratings have been rising, and yet he hasn't really had to do anything except he's done the executive order, obviously, on immigration, which we'll get to later on. But now he's got to veto the bill, all right, which he says he's going to do. And you wonder, with the popularity of the Keystone XL pipeline and most of the polls in the country, if maybe when he does the act of vetoing it, it changes things. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it starts to change things, Gary. I don't think that singular act is going to change a whole lot, but I think over the course of the next year and a half or so, where, purportedly we should be sending the president many bills that are bipartisan from the House and the Senate that he disagrees with, because you got to remember, he was the most liberal member of the Senate ever elected to the presidency. So he's going to oppose these things, and what it's going to do is set up the narrative that encircles the fact that the one that's been intractable in Washington for the last 6 years has not been the Congress. It's actually been the president. And you're going to see that because he's going to be saying no to just virtually everything that is sent to him, of real meaning, so to speak, the things of great value, the big ticket items. He's just going to say no to.
Scott, when you look at the House so far and the Senate,
yeah,
you've been in office a month. Obviously, people are eager and I would also say impatient.
Right.
And a lot of people are saying, well, there's not a whole lot that's been done so far. It looks like the Senate's kind of being a little mealy-mouthed on some of the things like immigration that you guys already sent to them. For people, and I guess I'm asking you for a little inside baseball to the extent that you give it to me, people are probably saying, are you guys laying out plans for what you believe? Are you are you kind of gearing up here? Is there or are you still back where a lot of people fear, where you're afraid to kind of act on principle and really juxtapose yourself with some bold colors opposite of those of the president? And if the president's, red, maybe you're blue.
Yeah, it's I will tell you, it's somewhere in the middle of that as I see it. There's a lot of people that want to take bold action. As a matter of fact, just I think 2 weeks ago in conference, I saw McCarthy walking down the aisle, and I said, Kevin, let's be bold. And that's exactly what I said to him. And when I say it's kind of in the middle there, I think to a certain extent, we as Republicans are trying to figure out how the Senate's going to act. We as House Republicans, and we have our own narrative in the House, which says, do we continue to try and pass things that we know that the Senate can pass, or do we pass what we think we can pass and then let the Senate do its business, whether that makes the bills better or worse? And that's a reasonable conversation to have. And I don't know, it might be issue by issue that we do that. On immigration, we demanded in the House that we pass what we thought we could pass and what we knew was the right thing. And if the Senate can't do it, that's their issue, but we have to lead where we can. So, I think that the House certainly, and the conferences, both the House and the Senate, have kind of a grander strategy where we've mapped out the big ticket items. So I think there is a strategy here, and it's not just take things as they come, although there'll be some of that. But I think the question still remains, even though the House is, I think, going to be pretty bold, the Senate can only do certain things, and we want to get things to the president's desk. That's the pragmatic thing. And so you get this the difference between being bold and being seen as able to responsibly and capably govern coming into the presidential election. And both those are competing, I think, discussions that aren't necessarily mutually agreeable at all times. And I think that's what makes it a little bit difficult.
I'm sure you read the papers and listen to the talk show hosts on the weekend and the talking heads that are out there. And there's a lot of questions. I mean, frankly, and I know right out here on Main Street, just doing our show, and people are saying, where's the boldness? Where is what you talked about to Kevin McCarthy? Where is the boldness? Why can't you stand up and make your ideas known? I mean, people can say what they want about the president. He's bold on telling people what his ideas are. I mean, there's no pretense now to where he wants to go on things. And so the question is, if you got elected and beat all his guys for the most part, except one here in Pennsylvania, the governor, during this last election, why don't you feel like you could stand up and be bold and say, this is what I'm for? Is it because, and for example, on immigration, is it because we have too many Republicans who like the idea that you can get cheap labor and undercut the American wage right now, and they want to kind of backhand their way into it by letting the president take the heat? I mean, those kind of things are what's laying out there. I think you probably have heard them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the reasons that it's hard to be bold is the president is one person that everybody focuses on. He had an interview, coming into the Super Bowl. And so everybody's attention's on him. And when he says it, he's the only guy saying it. And it has the full weight when you have 435 members of Congress and then another 100 members of the Senate. It's hard. It's a little more difficult to be bold because we don't all speak the same language. You don't all say the same thing because, just as you said, some Republicans are actually kind of okay with some of the stuff the president wants to do. And so it's not that they necessarily come out agreeing with him, because that probably doesn't look real good as a Republican, but they don't necessarily take him to task as somebody maybe like I would. I want to be bold on immigration, and I'm not caving in. I don't care what happens on the 27th or the 28th. I want us to push the president as far as we can and stop this executive amnesty. But there's a lot of people. It's not that they agree with the executive amnesty, Gary. They are so concerned about being called people that are irresponsible and would shut down a portion of the government. That's what they fear.
Again, I think. The thing that we're craving, and you and I have talked about this before, the thing that we're craving is a strong voice. That there is a voice out there. Republicans control both houses of Congress, and I guess we're looking for a voice, not necessarily a conservative or liberal voice, although I think most would probably say conservative, but a voice of value. A voice of values and principles that says, let's return this country back to the track that it's supposed to be on. We've kind of veered off on a side track. I think a lot of people would have said that with their vote in November. Your thoughts?
Right. Well, normally speaking, it might be the speaker, but now is it the speaker or is it McConnell? And it can't really be McConnell without a track record. And again, he's got to put pieces together of moderate, even liberal, and then conservative Republicans enough to get a vote across the finish line and pass something. And when you're doing that, can you be speaking from a foundational standpoint of saying, this is what we'd like to do, but this is all we can do?
Let me ask you this question, and again, I don't want to be unfair, but people are, but I love going to bat here with you. So a lot of people will sit out here, and this is unfounded or not, and they will say, okay, you're exactly right, Scott. You got to pull all these people together. And that's got to be a tough job. I certainly understand that. And states and districts have different needs and wants and all that. However, why does it seem like they always head back into kind of what is called the establishment corral, the status quo corral, and seem to kind of go back into guarding their own forts of power instead of going out and doing well by the people? That's one of the questions I think that hangs out here all the time.
Well, I agree with you. And certainly before I was an elected official, I would be screaming from the mountaintop right with you. I see it more clearly, not that I agree with it, but I think I see it more clearly from the inside. And when I think it comes down to standing for the ideology, standing on the foundation, standing up for something versus the money that drives the town, that drives a lot of policy, oftentimes, unfortunately, too many times, when I say the money, I mean the people that are able to raise the money, the people that are willing to give the money, they're interested in the trade. They're interested in business. And look, that ideology is nice and that's fine, but let's keep the cash register, let's keep that thing going, and we'll worry about that other stuff later. When it comes down to choosing one or the other, most of the people choose the cash register because their livelihoods depend on it. And I hate to say it, the Founding Fathers dealt with the same thing.
Yeah, there's no question about it, and I agree with you. I think it's just the Founding Fathers also did something. I mean, they came up with a government that's still working today. So when you say the Founding Fathers, yeah, they did, but they're in a situation where we're still living off them today, and I think we could take a lot of examples from that. I want to jump into some other things here.
Sure.
Josh Earnest said something the other day. He said, Gitmo has damaged relations with countries we rely on to protect us. Keeping the prison open undermines our national security. Obviously, we heard stories last week about one of the 5 terrorists that we negotiated the hostage exchange with Bo Bergdahl with has already contacted the Taliban. Last week, the White House and the spokespeople for the State Department went to tortured great lengths to say that Taliban is not a terrorist group. They do terrorist things, and they commit terrorist acts, but they're not a terrorist group. I look at this stuff right now, and I hear them contorting themselves around to figure out ways that their agenda is going to be passed. They're going to try to close Gitmo. They're already doing that. Do we really hurt anybody else in the world? Do we really get undermined? Do other people who support us not like Gitmo and say to us, you got to close out for us to support you even more? Are we creating more terrorists by keeping Gitmo open? I mean, I always have this funny idea that we move Gitmo to somewhere else, and all of a sudden the terrorists say, let's stop fighting these guys. They're much nicer than we thought. They closed Gitmo. Come on, let's just stop terrorizing. I mean, that's never going to happen.
Yeah, Gary, this is a really hot-button issue for me. In my opinion, and this is my opinion, the canary in the coal mine has come out and has said, wake up, America. Closing Gitmo is not going to make any difference. It might be a recruiting tool, but they don't really need recruiting tools. Look at what's happened to our world in the last 6 years and the rise of radical Islam. The whole world, and America included, needs to wake up to this. And when we say our allies are unhappy with it, really our allies like Saudi Arabia, who takes the money that we send it for oil and gasoline and then send it back to America to build mosques, to support Wahhabism and radicalism, and Qatar and Iran and all their proxies throughout the Middle East that they now essentially own 4 countries. While we're having this narrative, their Muslim Brotherhood is moving forward with their plan to take over all of the world in a caliphate, right. And it's slow and deliberate, and it's starting right here at home. As a matter of fact, it's well underway. Closing Gitmo is not going to help us. It's only a downside. In my opinion, there's only a downside to closing Gitmo. They're going to be foreign fighters. They're going to be, these wars don't happen now on the traditional boundary lines of countries. This is an ideological war where we have the combatants right among us, walking among us every single day. What are we going to do with them? We're going to put them in federal prison? The administration just released one of these prisoners from federal prison, and he went back to Qatar as a hero, and I'm sure he's going to be back, and he's probably back in the fight right now.
Yeah.
This is not going to end, and we have to get our minds wrapped around it and understand the resolve that we have to have if we want to be victorious, or if we want to take ourselves back to the 10th century, because that's where we're headed.
So it's interesting that we have this conversation going on. I looked at Jen Psaki, who is a spokesperson for the State Department. She said last week, it's an act of terror when American citizens or individuals are killed. But she declined to label Taliban's killing of Americans in the Kabul airport last week terrorism. We had three people killed. John Kerry. ISIS has absolutely nothing to do with Islam. It's an aberration, a distortion, a hijacking of a great faith. But it's not Islam. And then President Obama, we cannot provide terrorists a victory by overinflating their importance. I do insist that we do not provide a victory to these terrorist networks by overflating their importance, he said in a statement over the weekend. I mean, can we also provide them a victory by underinflating their importance?
I hate to say it, Gary, but I feel like these folks are living in some alternate state of reality and they don't see what's happening right around them. And they truly are the Neville Chamberlains of our age that are wishing and hoping for rational actors to act rationally. The problem is that these are not rational actors. When you are willing to strap a bomb onto your son or daughter, or yourself for that matter, it really changes the stakes of combating something like that. I mean, when someone is unafraid or actually more willing to lose their life because they're operating in a culture of death, a culture of life has something very great taken away from it in the war against something like that, because there's no incentive for them to stay. If you're wanting to die, then there's actually an incentive to die. And, it just goes, if you draw this out a little further to Iran and their nuclear wishes, I mean, if you don't have a rational actor to deal with, it's one thing if you want to blow up the marketplace and kill 90 people. It's another if you want to drop strategic nuclear weapons on Israel or something and kill 90 million people with a shot. I mean, that's what we're talking about here, and we're trifling with it like we're dealing with rational actors. They have a plan. They published a plan. It's open to everybody to see, and the plan is to get rid of all of us.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Hey, when we come back, I want to talk to you about the Benjamin Netanyahu visit and our relationships with Israel right now, and also the president sends a budget out today, and are you ready for that? We're going to ask Congressman Scott Perry that when we return right here on the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. Two things were talked about in Washington last week. The Netanyahu visit coming up in March to a joint session of Congress, of which Scott Perry will be sitting and hearing that. He is our congressman for the 4th Congressional District. And, we find out late last week that one of the president's field directors headed off to Israel and is working for the opposition party right now against Netanyahu with 4 other guys and ladies, I guess, right there in Israel to try to defeat Netanyahu. So what's the latest on this, Scott? Was it a good idea to invite him to come and speak to a joint session? It seems like the president has gone ballistic over this.
Well, I think it was a good idea. We have co-equal branches of government, and just because the president over the last 6 years, and many in his party haven't supported Israel, our best ally in the Middle East, doesn't mean that most Americans and certainly most Republicans don't support him, because we do. And we want to show that support, and we want to, I think, help to raise the alarm bell that Israel has been feeling for some time, the best way we can, which is to heighten the profile and give the prime minister a platform and the location and the airtime to let the American people know what's happening from his perspective. Because what is bad for Israel is bad for America. What's bad for democracy there is bad for democracy here. And while the Obama administration seems to be fine working with the enemies of Israel, we think that he should be working more closely with Israel itself and our other allies in the region, and he just refuses to do it. So we have to, we're co-equal. So we have every right, and he accepted the invitation. So good for him and good for us.
Congressman, I wanted to talk a little bit about the budget, but we're out of time right now. So I'll ask you about that once you've had a chance to kind of look at it and, let it absorb a little bit. And we'll get some thoughts from you on that at a later time. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. Always appreciate your time.
Thanks, Gary. Just know it never balances, but it's good that it's on time. All right? But thanks, Gary. Have a great day.
You too. Take care, Scott. Thanks so much.